I've become a student of introductions because one of my favorite things to do is when you get introduced, sometimes you can hear people, which particular website they looked at to see who you are, right? So I've been introduced as the famous Canadian novelist Brian Doyle. I was introduced once as Brian Doyle, who played in the World Series for the New York Yankees. I was like, oh no, the Yankees are evil satanic people. No, bad. And one of my favorites so far was a young lady introduced me. Brian Doyle is 29 years old, and he just published his first book. So let's start this in proper fashion. You don't know me from a hole in the wall, and I don't know you. And chances are good that our roads are not going to cross much in the years to come. So before I do anything else, I say thank you. Witnesses the great story. To see each other clearly, to pay attention to each other with all your might is the greatest of gifts. The woman who married me, little tiny woman, yay hi. I got down on my knees to propose like you learn at husband school. You're supposed to get down on your knees. And she was standing and I was kneeling, so we're eye to eye. She says, look, lust and romance are great, but witness is the great story. To see each other and pay attention. So thank you for your attention. What a great and generous gift. How proud I am of you. Good job. Okay. B, sometimes I curse. I'm sorry. I grew up in New York City and I'm a professional editor, so don't be offended if I suddenly say things like bullshit, okay? Sometimes I suddenly sing, which is really unnerving. My son Joey says, whenever you sing, Dad, it sounds like goose farts on a muggy day. So don't be unnerved. Sometimes I make you sing. Just roll with it, okay? Don't get upset. Molly Gloss wrote a masterpiece and one of the greatest books I ever read called The Dazzle of Day. Can I give homework? Can I give homework to people? You must read A Dazzle of Day by Molly Gloss. Write that down. Okay. All right. Let me start by making you giggle. I used to start my readings by reading a piece called Rules for Small Twin Boys in the Bathroom that my lovely bride and I, a little tiny woman, she and I have 3 children. We were given 3 children by the Coherent Mercy, and the world's nicest daughter, and then twin sons. And when the boys were little, we had pinned up in the bathroom, rules for small twin boys in the bathroom. Rule number 1, point it down! Rule number 2, keep pointing it down! You know, I can't remember the rest of them. Rule number 5, the most important rule of your whole life, boys, each boy points his own pointer. Can I help my brother? No, you cannot help your brother. Rule number 11, yes, Dad has a pointer. Rule number 12, no, Mom does not have a pointer. Rule number 13, no, I don't know where Mom's pointer went. Rule number 14, no, I don't know if God has a pointer. Rule number 15, yes, God would point it down if he had a pointer. Number 16, yes, God could point it down without using his hands, et cetera, et cetera. But now I don't read it anymore. Partly because my sons, whenever I wear my cool white shirt, my sons are like, are you doing a reading or a talk or something? I'm like, yeah. You're not going to read that thing, are you? So if you see my sons, this didn't happen. So let me start by reading a couple of little snippets. One about my children. My lovely bride, somebody asked her recently, do you guys have a video camera in your family? She goes, no, I got him. So many of the things that have happened over the years, I wrote down because I couldn't resist writing them down. They were so funny. And here's one of them. Lines my children have said to me in high dudgeon. You're not the boss of me. You're not as cool as you think you are. I don't know why Mom married you. You cook the same thing every night. Maybe you're not easily bored, but we are by you. You're old school, and that's not a compliment. All you ever say is, pick up that wet towel. You're always willing to believe the worst of us, Dad. All you expect is the bad things. You want to know why we curse sometimes? Listen to yourself. That hurt. All you ever listen to is the same 4 bands. True. You wear those same clothes every week. Why did you choose a job that doesn't earn you any money? If you and Mom both have good jobs, why don't we have any money? If it costs so much to live here, why don't we go somewhere else? If this house costs so much money, why don't we get a better house? If this one's so old and broken, why don't we pay for it? You would drive the same car for 30 years if you could get away with it. Your car is ugly. Your car stinks. Can I borrow the car? Rotten child. This is my son Liam, who said to me recently, our daughter recovered from being the world's biggest pill when she was 16, and then became the world's nicest person, and then went to college. I've spent 25 years working for colleges saying that college is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then my daughter went off to college, and now I'm totally against college because it took my daughter away from me. And my other son is yet to be a total pill. But my son Liam has taken the world pill championship from his sister. This boy said to me recently, the only reason you wanted to be a dad is so you could be mean to me. And I laughed, of course, the worst thing that could happen. I burst out laughing. And then I said, let me get this straight. I sought out your mother. There's 3 billion women on earth. And by unbelievable chance, I sought out your mother so that we magically, in some miraculous way, could have you as our child so that I would be pleased at being mean to you. Is that what you think? Is that where we're going here? And he goes, yeah! I was like, son, you were so going to a Jesuit university. I'm afraid we can't find a Catholic school for you, son. So anyway, I did commit a novel, as Jody said. A friend of mine who's a novelist said, you've committed a novel. Welcome to the dark side. And after the novel's published, it's really, you're supposed to get up and be articulate about it and say what it means and do readings from it and stuff like that. And it was really hard for me because A, I didn't know what it meant. I just did it. And B, I'd spent so much time working hard to stitch all the pieces of the novel together, it was really hard to pull out a piece to read. And then I realized that this was the one piece that I had to read, right? Several pieces, when I wrote them, I sobbed right into my keyboard, almost electrocuted myself, actually. But this piece, there's a scene in the book where there's an old man who's going to die. He's got all through the book, he's a timekeeper, the man with 13 days to live, the man with 12 days to live. Down the end of the book, he's got 3 days left to go. And a young guy says to him, can I ask you a question? Can I ask you what mattered in your life? What mattered to you? And the old guy says, hawks huddled disgruntled against hissing snow, wrens in winter thicket, swallows carving and swimming and slicing fat grinning summer air. Salmonberries, blackberries, thimbleberries, raspberries, cloudberries, snowberries, strawberries, gooseberries. My children learning to read, the sinuous liquid flow of rivers and minks and cats, fresh bread with way too much butter. My children's hands when they cut my ancient grizzled face in their hands, exuberance and ebullience, tears of sorrow which are the salt seas of the heart. Sleep in every form from doze to bone weary, the shivering ache of a saxophone and the yearning of an oboe. Folding laundry hot from the dryer, cobblers and tailors, spotless kitchen floors, the way horses smell in spring. Postcards in which the sender has written so much that he or she can barely squeeze in a signature. Opera on the radio, toothbrushes, the postman's grin, the green sifting powdery snow of cedar pollen on the porch every year, the way herons labor through the sky with such vast elderly dignity. People who care about hubcaps, the cheerful ears of dogs, all photographs of every sort, tip jars, wine glasses, the way barbers sweep up circles of hair after haircuts, handkerchiefs, libraries, poems read aloud by older poets on the radio, fedora hats, excellent knives, the very idea of albatrosses and thesauruses. The tiny screws that hold your spectacles together, book marginalia done with the lightest possible pencil, as if the reader is whispering to the writer. People who keep dead languages alive, wooden rulers, fresh mown lawns, first baseman's mitts, dish racks, the way my sons smell after their baths, the moons of Jupiter, all manner of boats, the fact that our species produced Edmund Burke, naps of every size, junior policeman badges, walruses, cassocks, surplices, the orphan caps of long-lost pigeons, welcome mats, ice cream trucks, all manner of bees, cabbages and kings, eulogy and elegy, puppetry, fingernail clippers, the rigging of sailing ships, ironing boards, hose and scythes, the mysterious clips that girls wear in their hair, bodhisattvas and beauticians, porters and portmanteaus, camas and canvas, bass and bluefish, furriers and farriers, trout and grout, peach pies of every size, the sprawling porches of old hotels and the old men who sprawl upon them, the snoring of children, the burble of owls, the sound of my daughter typing her papers for school in the other room, the sound of my sons wrangling and wrestling and howling and yowling, all sounds of whatever tone or tenor issue from my children in all other forms of coupled pain and joy, which is to say everything alive, which is to say all prayers, which is what I just did. Amen. Oh, thank you. I read that piece. I was just in a grade school. I love visiting grade schools because without fail, a kid, always a girl, why is that? Will raise your hand and ask me a question I can't answer, right? And so I'm visiting a 4th grade recently at Our Lady of Perpetual Inquisitiveness, I think. And this kid, always a girl raises her hand. Yes, Mr. Boyle, she says, Mr. Boyle. I was like, so much for fame, for God's sake. I got a question. What? And she goes, you say that's fiction, but that's all about you, isn't it? I was like, guilty. So, I was talking to my dad the other day. My dad is 91.6, my father, and my mom is 90 and change. And my father says it's a May-December romance, you know. My father gets out of bed every morning. It takes him a while. At almost 92, it takes him a little while to get started, you know, and he finally hoists himself out of bed and he stands says, another world and Olympic record for longest lived Doyle male. My mother's like, Jim, for God's sake, you know, and I hear this every morning, you know. My father, he's still smoking a cigar. My father loves to say at our family reunion, the Doyles, we die young, but we never lose our hair. We're like, Dad, that's a bad calculus, you know. And so, anyway, I was talking to my dad, I was talking to my dad about how I feel like I'm not even a writer anymore. I'm a listener. I walk around and listen, and people tell me the most amazing stories. You know, one of the great lessons I learned about being a writer was from my dad, who says, you want to be a writer, learn to shut your pie hole, ask a question, then actually listen to the answer. He asked it a couple of years ago at our family reunion. My father says, learning to ask a question and shut your pie hole. He's got all the moves with his cigar still. Is the secret to great literature and great seduction. I'm like, oh, Dad, oh. Too much information. You know, my mother's yelling at him from the other room. That's why we need kids, for Christ's sake. You know. So, anyway, so I wander around and people tell me stories. You just give them an opportunity. It turns out if you allow people to open a window in their souls and ask them, they'll tell you anything. And they'll tell you the most amazing stories if you just witness, if you just apply your ears and your eyes. You know, I want to say to all young people, whenever I visit classes, the most important thing you can have as a writer is not your fingertips, it's your ears. You know, your ears are the centuries of story. You know, if you listen, stories will come to you like the most amazing birds and flowers. You know, here's one. I was at the university. I worked for the University of Portland. I was visiting another grade school, and a kid said to me, "You're from the University of Portland? You mean there's a university attached to the women's soccer team?" I was like, said, "Yeah." But, so at our university, the very last event, when the freshmen come, there's a whole bunch of events, and the very last event is they gather with their parents for one last hour, and it's this freshman convocation thing. And when it's over, the parents leave, and the child is never a child again. The child is never their kid again. So I go every year and sob, you know. I'm like the designated sobber at my university. So, and this story happened recently. This happened last year at our freshman convocation. A piece called All Legs and Curiosity. On the shore of the sea of bubbling, babbling, lanky kids dipping their toes into the ocean of college for the first time, there were also, of course, a raft of outwardly calm but inwardly rattled parents of every gender. And I got to talking to a tiny mother, and as soon as she started talking about her daughter, she burst into tears, right there by the women's bathroom. But she recovered fast and started talking faster, and I think you should hear what she said. "This is the greatest moment and the worst moment of my whole life," she said. "I was just changing that kid's diapers a minute ago. Now she's all legs and curiosity. I can't believe she's not coming home tonight. I'll get ready to send her a text message at midnight. 'Where are you? Come home now.' And she won't come home tonight, will she? She'll be here with you. I can't stand that. Her father can't stop crying, you know. He's out in the truck. Everybody thinks he's a tough guy, and he's out there crying in the truck. These are her babies, all these tall babies. Will you take care of her?" This lady was about 4 foot nothing, and she's looking up at me. I felt like I was a power forward for the first time. She's shaking her finger at me. "Will you take care of her?" I was like, "Yes." "Will you take care of her? Will you know if she's sad and scared? She's scared more than she admits, you know. She brought her baby blanket, you know, in the bottom of her luggage. She doesn't think I know, but I know because I held it against my face last night when I packed her bag and it smelled like her. And I cried right into the bag. I hope you know how great she is. She's the greatest kid in the history of the world. She wanted to come here so bad. The day the letter came from you, she right out the front door and across the grass and around the neighborhood waving her letter at the neighbors. And everyone was laughing and pouring out of their houses to give her a hug because everybody loves her. You'll love her too, you'll see. You better take care of her." She didn't want to go anywhere else. We tried to be sensible, but she wouldn't hear of it. She knew you would know what she wanted more than anything. She never wears socks, you know. She'll get sick twice this year. Mark my words, October and February. Are you writing this down? At which point I started writing like hell, you know. Are you writing this down? Can you tell the nurses here? She wants to be a nurse, you know. Her grandmother was a nurse, my husband's mother. He's still out in the truck crying. He says he'll be fine by dinner. He will not be fine by dinner. He used to carry her on his back all the time when she was little. They would climb mountains that way with her whispering in his ear. He makes fish just the way she likes it. He says he's going to go talk to your chefs here about how to cook their fish. She'll be the best nurse there ever was. She has the biggest heart of anyone God ever made in a million years. I can't stand it that she's not coming home tonight. She's not coming home as a kid ever again, is she? Will you take the best care of her that you can? Do you swear? Because I spent every minute of every day since she was born thanking God for the gift of that kid. And even when she was bad, she was the best kid ever. You promise me you'll take care of her. I can't stand this. You'll know her. She's tall with long hair and blue jeans and a smile. I was like, great, that reduces it to about 800. Thanks. I can't stand this. You can't miss her. When you meet her, you'll know who she is. You'll know. Trust me. Once you meet her, you'll never forget her for the rest of your life. Trust me. I was like, oh my God. I shuffled as fast as I possibly could back to my office to leave a trail for myself. That's what you learn as a writer. Leave a clue, right? And then I went right to the president's office. It's a small university. The president and I know each other to his detriment, you know. So I go to bang on his door. His door is closed. I go to bang on his door to tell him, oh my God, this is an unbelievable story. And his secretary goes, no. I said, what? And he goes, she says, he's on the phone. He's on the phone with an important donor. And I was like, yeah, this is important. And she goes, the guy's going to give us millions of dollars. I'm like, yeah, this is important. And she goes, oh my God. So I bang on the door, wham, wham, wham. And I hear the voice from inside, Brian, I know it's you. Get the hell out of here. I was like, Father, this is important. He's a priest, right? It's a Catholic university. You're all Catholic, right? Well, you will be by the end of the hour. So, and he goes, what? And I said, this is important. And I walk in, he's got his hand over the phone, you know, and I said, this is important. He goes, I said, yeah, call him back. And he sa's, well, sir, you know, I just told this story to some college people, college fundraisers, and they all like, really, who was he on the phone with? I was like, oh, no. No. So he goes, sir, I'll call you back. And he hangs up the phone and he goes, what is so important? I said, oh, this unbelievable story this mother just said to me, and we got to take care of this kid. It was like so overwhelming to me. Father, we got to do this. We're so responsible. And he goes, oh my God, that's a great. What's the woman's name? I was like, I don't know. He goes, what's the child's name? I said, I don't know. Why the hell do I employ you? I was like, I don't know. Went back to my office, you know. So, well, I was on the phone with my dad. Bless his soul, my father. My father and I did a book together, which led to the funniest book tour ever. And I was telling a student today in Jody's class, my father, first time we're going to sign books for our cool new book. Our first book together, we did half each, right? And so we sit down, and my father's going to sign books. We waited 75 years for this moment. And my brothers and I were all looking at him, thinking, wow, this is like a heavy, important moment in the family. You know, my father takes a book and misspells it. That was his first. You know, but anyway, he had a pen like this. He had this huge magic marker that looked like it came from the Defense Department or something, you know. And I said to him, Pop, what are you going to do with that? Someone might ask me to sign her bra. I was like, oh. You know, my mother was not pleased. So anyway, my father and I were talking, and I called my dad to say, Dad, I discovered what the seventh circle of hell is. Now I know what the seventh circle of hell is. It's the children's holiday pageant. And my father said, yes, I believe you should be issued a large glass of whiskey as you enter the auditorium. And so we got to talking, and he said, remember your brother Tommy? And I said, what? And he goes, you don't remember Tommy's Christmas pageant? And I was like, no, man. So now when I do readings, I'd love to tell the story because it's so stupid. Like my Dalai Lama story. You remind me to tell my Dalai Lama story at the end. So my brother Tommy's in kindergarten, right? He's 6 years old. He's in the Christmas pageant, and the stick of the Christmas pageant is that all the kindergarten kids are dressed as local flora and fauna for some reason, and Tommy's supposed to be a potato. It's like we grew up in New York City. He should have been a switchblade, I feel. And Anyway, so the night before the pageant, right, he's in kindergarten. The night before the pageant, he informs my mother that he's in the pageant the next day and he needs a costume, right? And I'm supposed to be a potato. My mother, with 8 kids, my mother turns to my one sister and says, you're in charge of his costume, and off she goes. So my sister's not interested. My sister waits till everybody leaves the room, and she goes to the closet and gets this little old brown soiled raincoat and hands it to my, drapes it around my brother Tommy and says, "You're a freaking potato. And if you tell Mom, if you complain to Mom, I'll break your fingers." So the next day, there's Tommy in the pageant, right? And there's all these potatoes in the front row. I've never said that sentence before. And so all the other potatoes in their beautiful potato costumes that their mother worked on for a month. And so the thing was, each child, as the spotlight hits each child, the child steps forth and says, like, you know, "Hosanna in the highest," or whatever it was in Catholic school. You're all Catholic, right? And so Tommy, the light hits Tommy, and he steps forth, and he completely forgets his line. But he's a self-possessed kindergartner, and he steps into the light and says, "When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer." I swear, which is a beer jingle where I grew up. And so there's a gasp of absolute horror in the auditorium, right? Except the Doyles, who were weeping with laughter. My father said later, "I thought I was going to urinate in my underwear." So that was bad enough. So I'm choking with laughter talking to my dad. My dad says, "You don't remember your brother Peter in the Easter pageant either, do you?" And I was like, "Oh no, this can't possibly be any worse." And so my brother Peter's in 3rd grade, same nun, okay? So the theater, the same pageant, plan is enforced. This time, all the kids get Christmas or Easter eggs, right? In the front row is Easter eggs made out of cardboard, and each child pops out of the Easter egg and says, "He is risen," or whatever it is. And so my brother Peter doesn't even forget his line, okay? He never even gets to forgetting his line. Spotlight hit him, the top of the egg comes off, and Peter jumps out and says, "Jesus Christ, it's hot in there!" See, this explains a lot about my family. And again, the same thing happens. There's a gasp of horror in the whole auditorium, except for the Doyles, who were absolutely choking with laughter. My mother said later, "At least, thank God, we'd seated ourselves under a statue of the Madonna." And the second time my father reminded me was enlivened by this young nun who was in charge of the theater productions, was actually from Ireland. And so this particular egregious mistake in the history of the Doyle family was enlivened greatly by the nun cursing in Gaelic into the microphone behind the curtain. So my father never forgot that. He thought that was the highlight of the moment. So anyway, so there's 2 stories from the Doyle family. Somebody said to me recently, "Was your family really that odd?" I said, "Let me explain a few things about my family. A, I do speak Gaelic. For those of you who read Mink River, I do speak Gaelic because my grandmother lived with us. My grandmother spoke Gaelic, and she wouldn't speak it. It was the poor people's tongue. So she wouldn't speak it in the house because it reminded her of her awful childhood and poverty and stone and blah, 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 except when she lost her temper. Then she would go right back into Gaelic. So we learned to curse like sailors in Gaelic. So does everybody here speak Irish? You're all Catholic and you all speak Irish? Yeah? Well, the very first Gaelic I ever learned, well, can we have an Irish lesson? Why not? Ready? Everybody repeat after me. Ready? Pogue. Pogue. Mahone. Mahone. Now do it together. Pogue Mahone. Which means kiss my butt in Gaelic. The very first Gaelic I ever learned was Pogue Mahone, Gmini Dia 2, which means kiss my butt, God bless you, which is very, very Irish. Anyway, it's a strange feeling. But my grandfather was one of those guys who was kind of locked in his dignity, you know, kind of an Irish Catholic thing. He could not say, "I love you." That would be like, woo, way too emotionally naked for Grandpa. But he was given to imprecations and ejaculations, and so he would say things, no kidding, like, "Sweet teenage mother of the muling baby Jesus." You know, when you hear somebody yelling that in the kitchen, you're like, okay, what planet are we on here, you know? And another one, my brother Peter reminded me another one recently. "I'll be rolled in honey, I'll be dipped in honey and rolled in the streets of Mecca and Shiraz." What does that even mean? What does that mean? So this explains my childhood, you know. Well, let's see, let me read another piece. Well, we'll have a voice vote. Here's a piece from the novel, or an unbelievable thing that a young nurse said to me recently. Nurse? Both? What time is it? Oh, we got plenty of time. Oh, you're so screwed. We're here till midnight. Well, let me read a piece in a novel. It was hard to find pieces to read. And one of the things, for those of you who have not yet, who did not read the novel? Raise your hand. Go ahead, raise your hand. What the hell was more important than me? Oh, sorry. If you do ever chance to read the novel, a number of unusual things happen. And people all the time use the phrase magic realism. Oh, is it magic realism? And I guess it was more to me the suggestion of possibility. Are we really so sure of reality? I'm not, you know. As my brother Tommy says, whatever you're sure, don't be. Pretty good advice. So are we really sure that bears don't have their own languages? That bears don't spend a lot of time ragging on cougars? Are we really so sure that crows don't actually run the world and just don't tell us about it? You know? So I wanted to suggest things. And one of them was this passage in which the river actually talks. The river talks of itself. What the river thinks. Salmon and steelhead and cutthroat trout, fir needles, salmon berries dropping suddenly and being snapped up by trout who think they are orange insects. Alder and spruce roots drinking me, always their eager, thin little rude roots poking into me. Rocks and pebbles and grains of stone and splinters of stone and huge stones and slabs and beaver and mink and crawdads and feces from the effluent treatment plant upriver. Rain and mist and fog and gale and drizzle and howl and owl. Asters and arrow grass, finger creeks, feeder creeks, streams, ditches, seeps and springs. Rowboats and rafts, canoes and chicory, men and women and children dead and alive. Willows and beer bottles and blackberry and ducklings and wood sorrel and rubber boots and foxglove and buttercup and rushes and slugs and snails and velvet grass and cucumber and orb weaver spiders and that woman singing in me, singing with her feet in me, singing. Baneberry and bear grass, thrush and hemlock and coffee grounds, thimbleberry and heron, smelt and moss and water ouzels, and bear scat, bramble and bracken, elk drinking me, cougar drinking me, ground cedar and ground ivy and ground pine, sometimes a lost loon, cinquefoil and eelgrass, vultures and voles, water striders, mosquitoes, mosquito hawks, dock and dewberry, moths and mergansers, huckleberry and snowberry, hawks and osprey, water wheels and beaver dams, deer and lupine, red currant, trees and logs and branches, and bark and duff. I eat everything. Elderberry and evening primrose. I know them all. They yearn for me. Caddisfly and coral root. I do not begin, nor do I cease. Foam flower, fleece flower, fireweed. I always am, I always will be. Lily and lotus, swell and surge and ripple and roar and roil and boil. I go to the mother, madrone and mistmaiden. The mother takes me in, nettle and ninebark, pelt and peppergrass. She's waiting for me, pine sap and poppy. I bring her all small waters, raspberry and rock cress. I draw them, I lure them, I accept them. Salal and satin flower. She is all waters, the mother, tansy and trillium. She drinks me, velvet grass and vernal grass. I begin as a sheen on leaves, high in the hills, a wet idea, a motion, a dream, a rune. And then I'm a ripple, and I gather the small waters to me, the little wet children, the rills of the hills, and we are me. And I run to her, muscling through wood and stone, cutting through everything, singing and shouting, roiling and rippling, and there she is, waiting and whispering, her salty arms always opening, always opening, always open. Ha ha ha, that was pretty cool. I never read that before. That was fun. You know, writers never admit that they have fun, you know. One of my pet peeves is people saying, well, the arduous art of literature. And I always want to get a big baseball bat and hit people who say that. It's fun, for heaven's sake. Yes, it's hard. You have to learn what to kill. You have to learn what to cut. What's the great line from E.B. White? Slay your darlings. You know, so anyway. Here's another story. This young woman said this to me recently. I met a young nurse. And I read this every time I do a reading because for a number of reasons. One of which was the greatest line ever written in Oregon. It wasn't written by the genius Molly Gloss, God bless her soul, nor was it written by Ken Kesey, God bless his soul. It wasn't written by Ursula Le Guin, another little tiny woman, by the way. Ursula Le Guin is the size of a large fire hydrant, okay? I sign books every year with Ursula Le Guin on purpose because it's really humiliating. I always try to sit as close to her as possible because there'll be like 2 people wanting me to sign their books and about 90 waiting for Ursula. And I'm waiting for one of these years where she's going to turn and give me the finger, which I think would be fun. Anyway, but the greatest line ever written in Oregon not by Barry Lopez. It was written by William Stafford. Violence is a failure of the imagination. Violence is a failure of the imagination. What a line. You talk about your Zen koans, man. You know, and so I'm obsessed with, we send these children off. We send these children off to wear uniforms for us, and they're brave and cool, and the people who are most articulate and eloquent and powerful about war being stupid are people who've been in wars, you know. My father was in not one but 2 wars, and my father will say bluntly and honestly, war is the stupidest solution to conflict ever invented. My father likes to say, this was bin Laden's biggest problem. He was stupid. It wasn't even that he was murderous. He was a stupid man. He didn't read his history. As my father loves to say, smoking a cigar, we Catholics tried converting people by cutting their heads off. It's called the Crusades, Brian. It doesn't work. It's a poor efficiency project. You know? So, but we send these children, they're kids, you know, they're kids. The smartest thing a kid said to me recently is this young man, 33 years old. My lovely bride says, you can't call him a kid. You know, he's 33, and I'm thinking, this child, he looks like Rambo, this guy. He's a colonel in the United States Army, this guy. He's been 2 tours in Iraq, 1 tour in Afghanistan, 1 year off the grid, you know. And I said to him, we gave him an alumni award. He's a University of Portland alumnus. I said to him, can I ask you a question? What is the point of your work? He's career Army, right? I said, what is the point? I don't mean to be rude, but what's the point of what you do? He goes, oh, the point of my job, Mr. Doyle, is to put my job out of business. The point of my job is to make war a memory. The point of my job is to make a world where someday a 4-year-old kid will say to his grandfather, what does the word gun mean, Grandpa? I'm like, oh man, I stood there shivering. You know, the point of my job is to put my job out of business. It's like, oh man, this guy looks like Rambo with a 13-year-old boy's face. You know, they're kids. They're kids. Kids with weapons, you know. Here's this young lady. Recently I met a quiet young woman who didn't say much, but what she said was wry and pithy and direct. And after a while I asked if I could take notes as she talked, and she said okay. And this is most of what she said. My name is Jacqueline. You can call me Jackie. Until recently you could call me Lieutenant. I'm now retired from the service. I'll be 27 years old on Sunday at 1400 hours. I was a hematology nurse. I'm in good health considering. I drink tea. I learned to love tea in Iraq. Some days we had tea 10 times a day. We found a samovar and learned how to use it. I had to look up what the word samovar meant. There was a man among us who could play that thing like a guitar. It got so we couldn't drink anything other than the tea he summoned from that samovar. It was a most remarkable tea. He vanished one day when his truck was hit by the bandits. Another man took his place. He vanished too. I took his place. After a while, I forgot everybody's names. For a while, I called people by their numbers, but after a while, I didn't call them anything. That's when I knew I had war sickness big time. I never got hit by fire, but pretty much everyone I know did. For a while, I thought it was me, that as soon as I said hello to someone or shook hands or learned their names, they were doomed. So I stopped touching people and learning their names. Oh, Jesus, a kid said this to me. You would think wigging out in the middle of the war would be bad, but it's just normal. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. An American girl said this to me. Let me read that again. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. Man, probably because we don't have any words for what happens. The fact is that wars kill words, but no one talks about that. Wars kill everything except more wars. Wars never end. They just hibernate and mutate and come back stronger someplace else. Wars are the zombies of history. Some of what wars kill off, you see getting killed off like kids and towns and schools and Saturdays, but some you don't, like birds. Birds don't nest in wars, you know, so pretty soon there's no birds. And then where are you without birds? What kind of world is that with no birds in it? You notice things getting killed off little by little, and then after a while you stop noticing things altogether. You don't even notice yourself. You just get by. In the end, all I cared about was my shoes. You want really good shoes in a war, trust me on this one. I had the best boots you could ever imagine, and I kept those suckers clean and oiled and ready for anything. When I got out of the war, I kept wearing my boots for the longest time. I wore them with my pajamas and with my bathrobe and with shorts in the summertime. It's only the last few weeks I can go someplace without my boots. Those are really good boots. When I'm in those boots, nothing can happen to me. Trust me on this one. I keep them on a special shelf at home just in case. You want to know something real and true and honest and deep about war? I'll tell you. Boots. Good boots. Good boots are the secret. It's like, oh man. Ooh, I cried. You know, but a kid tells you something like that, you're like, oh, for heaven's sake. I know my job. My job is to catch that story, shape it, and hand it to you. It ain't my story. It's yours now. It's our story. You know, there'll come a day, if we do this right, you know, why am I here and why are you here in the end? This has nothing to do with Brian Doyle or Mink River. It has to do with stories. You know, we're story junkies. We're addicted to it. Stories matter. They're nutritious. They're holy. They're powerful. We got no stories. We got nothing. You know, we're all composed of stories. Some of them true, in my case. But, you know, they're so powerful and so nutritious. That's why we're here. We trade them back and forth because they're holy, you know. That matters to tell a good story. I'm not talking fiction and nonfiction. I'm talking about truth and lies, substance and illusion, as Van Morrison says. The stories we tell matter. You know, when you tell a story like that, I'd love to hear somebody say to me, oh yeah, wars are a great idea. Really? Really? I got a story that makes you look like an idiot. Here's a story. Here you go. You know, the same thing with bin Laden. After bin Laden murdered 3 of my friends on September 11th. My friends, Tommy Crotty, Farrell Lynch, and Sean Lynch. Good men, good Irish Catholic boys from New York, you know, roasted to white ash. People breathed in my friends in the 5 boroughs of New York. I was enraged and helpless and completely speechless, you know. And then my daughter, bless her soul, said, really, what are you going to do? I said, what's to do? You know, a magazine called me and said, we're doing a special issue. We'd like you to contribute. I said, no, stupid. What? I'm not adding to the ocean of witless commentary and vengeful prose. You know, what can I possibly say that would matter? You know, and my daughter said, well, what are you going to do then? I said, what do you mean? And she goes, well, Dad, you're always lecturing us. If God gives you a tool and you don't use your tool, that's a sin. And Dad, no offense. You ever notice when people say no offense means they're about to offend you? Dad, no offense, but you know, you only have the one tool. You know? You say so yourself, so no offense. And so if you're not going to tell stories, then isn't that a sin? I'm like, go to your room. But she was right, you know. So I began to write stories to fight back. And I realized, you know, for somebody like bin Laden, you know, a wonderfully talented guy, a brilliant guy, rich as sin, charismatic by all accounts, the guy was a dope because he didn't understand that stories matter. You know, I got a story that's bigger than any number of times you want to murder children. What about the firemen who ran up that day, knowing they weren't coming back down? A friend of mine was a fireman that day, and I called him and said, did those guys know they weren't coming back down? And he goes, what do you think? Did you think we were going to put out a fire on the freaking 110th floor? I said, well, why did they run up then? Why did they run up if they knew they weren't coming back down? And he goes, we don't have words for that, do we, Brian? You're a writer, you find them. No pressure there. But you know, it's like duty, honor, responsibility. They're not big enough, man. They're not big enough. There are stories. Only a story can tiptoe toward a thing that we don't have words for. You know, like the word God. That's a real big word. It's just a word. You know, it's only a word. It's actually a Hebrew word. It comes from the Hebrew word gad, to overcome or invade. You know, isn't that cool? But it's a word. Why fight over it? For heaven's sake. Bin Laden, stupid. Bad student of history, as my father. So, anyway. So I told stories. I told stories about the fireman who ran up that day and the guy who carried a lady in her wheelchair 55 floors. 55 floors, a lady in a wheelchair, and then turned and went back in. You know, so any kind of stories about murder, this will solve a problem. I got a story bigger than that, pal. I got a fireman running up, 36 years old, 6'4", 220 pounds, strong as an ox, 3 children and a wife he loves with all his might. And he ran up, man. He ran up because we don't have words for that kind of love, that kind of courage. We don't have words for that. We can tell stories. Stories matter. They're huge and important, you know. If there's any homework I would assign you, it's like the thing that we do, the thing that we are, take it serious. I don't mean be serious or be somber. Laugh your ass off. But I mean tell stories and trade stories. And when you hear fatuous, when you hear a lie, puncture it. It's no accident that Twain is our greatest writer. Twain was the best of us at puncturing the fatuous. you know, in the pompous. So anyway, well, who knew this was going to turn into a gospel revival meeting? I did a reading recently, and a lady comes up to me and she goes, "So you're Catholic?" I said, "Well, ma'am, it was a Catholic university. I just spent a whole hour talking about Flannery O'Connor." So I was like, "Yeah, I thought we made it fairly clear in this last hour." And she goes, "Because there's a future for you in the evangelical church." I'm like, no, I could immediately feel my mother standing behind me saying, "Bend down here so I can slap you." You know? So anyway, well, I feel like I've had you for a long time. Oh my God, I've talked for 45 minutes. What a garrulous person. So, my Dalai Lama story. Can I tell you one last story and then we'll do, you want to do questions and stuff? Or else we'll just stay here till midnight. We'll have beer shipped in. Well, let me tell you one last story. And I love to tell this story. I've never written this story down because it's so much fun to tell it. And I love to tell it because it proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that I'm a complete idiot, which is refreshing to remember every once in a while, you know. Somebody asked me recently, "Oh, you know, you've written all these books and won all these awards and stuff. You know, do you think you ever might get a swelled head?" And like, me? I got kids. So my ego is about this big, you know. "You're the worst dad ever. I hate you. Ooh, you know, the only reason Mom married you is because all the other boyfriends said no." I'm like, what? Is that true? I was telling Jody, I wrote a short story recently that started with a line that one of my sons said. And the lovely bride and I got married later, and one of my sons said they were counting the number of boyfriends that Mom had before she married Dad, and they got up to 11. And my son Joey said, "Was Mom a hussy?" I was like, "No, we got married later. It was totally normal, and blah, 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 blah." And then stupid me, I always say, stuff pops out. It's like Ronald Reagan. Things just pop out without the filter. You know, trees are the cause of pollution. Right. And so I'm standing there with my lovely bride. The boys go off to rob a liquor store or whatever they do. And so I said to my lovely bride, "You know," actually, so she stomps off down the hallway, slamming every door on the way down. Wham! I should have married that Bobby Hayward. Wham! And you know, but one great thing about fiction is that you can actually take that out for a walk. So I wrote a piece called "The Boyfriend's Bus," where we all get on a wine bus and go out in the wine country. And I got the greatest compliment of all. A woman read it and didn't read the little part on the cover where it says short stories. And she goes, "Oh my God, I didn't know that about Mary's boyfriends. You spent the day with Mary's boyfriend?" I'm screwed. Anyway, so one last story, my Dalai Lama story. I met the Dalai Lama, the one and only, capital T, the Dalai Lama, the incarnation of the Buddha of compassion, I point out. He was coming to the University of Portland to give a speech, and when he talked for 2 hours, by the way, about 2 lines of Tibetan scripture, it was like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? So I told my father after, I called my dad and said, "Dad, the Dalai Lama was just here, the Dalai Lama." My father says, with this inimitable cigar smoke coming through the phone, you know, he goes, "Do you have a visiting pagan program at the University of Portland?" You know, people think I make this stuff up, but it's anyway. So the Dalai Lama comes to the University of Portland, and we're gonna take his picture in the way of all marketing and public relations offices. We're gonna take his picture with everybody who ever lived, apparently. So we set up a screen. There's a white screen and chalk marks on the ground where you're supposed to stand and have your picture taken with him. He just stands there and, like, one after another, people get, you know. So I'm standing there with the photographer, and the photographer leaves for some reason. So I'm standing in this room by myself, and it's the University of Portland's Athletic Hall of Fame room. So the shrines to all. We used to have a great football team, almost as good as yours. We used to have a great team. And so it's mostly football players on the walls, right? And so the entourage is milling around out in the hallway. You forget that the Dalai Lama's a rock star. He's a rock star. He's got an entourage. And the State Department agents, and there's a whole lot of important people with 2 cell phones and people talking into their collars, that kind of a thing. And there's a lot of Tibetan monks. No offense, but they all kind of look the same. They have this maroon and saffron thing going on, and crew cuts, and they're all kind of burly. It's like they got all the old halfbacks in the world, and you know. So the entourage is milling around. There's a whole bunch of Tibetan monks and stuff, and then finally this one Tibetan monk pops into the room where I'm standing, the Hall of Fame room, And he comes right up to me, real kind of a burly guy, and he comes right up to me, real direct, laser attention kind of a guy, and he goes, "How you doing?" And I'm thinking, all right, a Tibetan monk from Brooklyn. So, "How you doing?" Which is the New York thing. "How you doing? How you doing?" I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "Good. Who are all these people on the walls?" Real direct guy, real laser attention. I said, "Well, they're mostly football players. We have the greatest women's soccer team in the world, so about 5 years from now, there'll be all women on the walls, but right now it's mostly football players." And he goes, "That's too bad, because soccer is the greatest sport of all." And I said, "No, it isn't. Basketball's the greatest sport of all. What's the matter with you?" And, I'm thinking in my head, "What's with you, pal?" And he goes, and he comes even closer to me. Now he's almost inside the personal space bubble, and he comes right up to me, real laser direct, this guy. And he shakes his finger in my face and says, "Maybe you didn't hear me. I said soccer is the greatest sport of all." And I actually said, quote unquote, "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal." My brother Kevin said, "At least you didn't say bub, okay?" That would be disturbing. "Maybe you didn't hear me, pal. Soccer's a great sport, very sinuous and quicksilver, but nobody scores, Whereas basketball, very sinuous and quicksilver, and everybody scores. A very generous sport." And as those words left the prison of my teeth, I realized it's the Dalai Lama. There's one of these guys, and I realized, oh my God in heaven. It literally, as the words fell into his ear, to his credit, he roared with laughter. And later, one of my brothers said, he probably doesn't meet anybody who says, "Hey, get a grip, pal." He's probably surrounded by yes men, and maybe he was a little refreshed. But I was horrified. I realized, oh my God, it's the Dalai Lama. I've spent my whole life thinking about grace and mercy and forgiveness and joy and courage and, holiness and attentiveness is the beginning of all prayer, and all these things I think about and talk about and write about all the time. And I was like, oh my God, I'm with one of the greatest spiritual leaders of all time! And we argued about sport! So he roars with laughter, and then at that exact second, wham, in floods the entourage. And it turns out, in Tibetan tradition, the Dalai Lama enters a large room alone to clear out the bad spirits. But it's like some magic time. It's like 99 seconds or 111 seconds. It's some magic Tibetan thing. And the poor guy, he's on the road all the time, so he's got this calibrated to the microsecond, right? As does the entourage, because they go through this all day, every day. And so, wham, in floods the entourage. "Your Holiness, we really must go. You need to give your unbelievably boring 2-hour speech." And, and so they're hustling him off, and "Oh, Your Holiness, woof, woof, woof," and nobody's paying attention to me, and I'm standing there going, "Unbelievable, stupid. Oh no, stupid. I'm an Irish Catholic American from New York City. I have done stupid big time. I went right to the top of the stupid list, So they get him, they're hustling him out, Your Holiness, woof, woof, woof," and they get him all the way to the doorway of the room, and they're about to pop him out toward the stage, and he suddenly turns back and kind of parts the sea of the entourage and looks at me and he goes, "You!" I was like, "What?" I'm thinking, it's already been a bad day for me. "What do you want?" And he goes, "You! We'll continue this conversation in this lifetime or the next." Ah! and he pops through the door with this huge laugh hanging behind him, like the Cheshire Cat's smile. He has the greatest laugh. Has anybody ever heard him laugh? He's got this roaring laugh, this big booming. How that guy is so filled with humor and mercy is a mystery to me. The poor guy's on the road all the time. His country's been eaten. He'll never see his country ever again the rest of his life. A lot of his friends and family have been murdered, and he's the most happy, cheerful, humorous guy. He's wrong about sports, but So he gives me, in this lifetime and the next, and he pops through the door, and I'm standing there with my knees shaking, So I go home that day, and I walk in the house, and my lovely bride says, "How was your day?" The traditional husband-wife question. "Hey, how was your day?" I usually say, "Good, can I have a beer?" And so I said, actually, Mary, today was pretty interesting. I got to meet the Dalai Lama. I got a couple of minutes alone with the Dalai Lama. She goes, "Oh my God, one of the greatest spiritual leaders in all time. What did you talk about?" I was like, "Sports." She goes, "What?" I said, "Sports." She goes, "You talk about sports?" And what? I said, well, you know, we get it, and we didn't really talk. We had kind of a disagreement. She goes, you got into an argument with the Dalai Lama, the Buddha of compassion, about sports? And up rose that defensive male sap. Every guy here, and every woman too, come to think of it, knows what I mean. Up when you're challenged, up rises the sap, you know, and up rose the sap. I said, yeah, I could feel it coming up in me, like, you know, yeah, well, he said soccer was the greatest sport of all. And when somebody says something like that, you got to slap it down right quick. And she's like, Jesus freaking, you got to be kidding me. Unbelievably. And she stomps off down the hallway again, slamming every door. I should have married Bobby Hayward. Wham! You know? Well, our sons are standing there. Our sons were young, or two sons, and they were fanatic basketball players. And there's one of those long, beautiful, pregnant pauses, you know. And then my son Joey, to his eternal credit, says, well, Dad, you were right, so what's the problem? Like, here's some money for you, kid. You know? So, well, that used to be the end of the story. But then a few years ago, I got really sick. Where my hands and feet shut off for a year. Okay, bit of a problem. Bit of an engineering problem. I mean, really sick, and evil sick. And my sister's a Buddhist nun. My sister's a Buddhist nun in a monastery. Good Catholic family. My mother says, we have a nun in the family. We don't care what brand. So my sister writes to the Dalai Lama and sends a note saying, my brother's very sick. Here's a photograph of my brother. Please, if you could gather prayers for him, that would be really great. You may remember my brother. And the Dalai Lama writes back and says, yes, of course we'll take care of issuing prayers for your brother. I do remember your brother, and you tell him for me he's wrong. and to my humiliation, they have this letter framed and hanging in the monastery. So I stopped visiting the monastery. So I love to tell that story, A, because it proves I'm an idiot, which is refreshing. B, every time I tell it, I guess I feel, and it happens tonight, when people gather together in a room, some kind of a thing is possible. You know, we don't have any words for it. It has nothing to do with me and nothing to do with my book or anything. It has to do with us. This is like a story-catching convention. You know, like, I feel like we're all teammates for a little time. We're all together. We all have our hearts focused in the same direction. And it matters. Somehow it matters. It's a cool thing. And so to tell that story and have you laugh, laughter is holy. And I feel like somehow I always have this deep-seated joy that somehow I really think the Dalai Lama feels it every time everybody bursts out laughing. Like he gets a tickle in his ear and says to the entourage, "Do you guys hear that?" Like, "Yeah, Your Holiness, we got to go get boring talk now." You know, so can I ask you a strange favor as a way to finish this? I mean, can we all just for a second, laugh like the Dalai Lama? I know that sounds crazy, but it seems like a fun thing to try. I mean, let's do it because it's stupid. You know? I mean, how often are you stupid on purpose? Well, you know, most of the time it's an accident, right? So the guy has an unbelievable roaring laugh. So do me a freaking favor. I'm the dad, and do me a favor, just for a second, drop your mask, don't be cool, and let it rip. Just rip it out. The loudest, stupidest, biggest laugh you could possibly laugh. Ready? Everybody all together. 3, 2, 1. Ah! Isn't that great? Okay, one more time. And this time, everybody do it at the same time. God, see me after class. All right, ready? Just rip it. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Ah! Okay, that was the weirdest moment in the history of Eastern Oregon University. All right, that's a good place to stop. Jesus. All right, let me end in exactly the same way we began. You don't know me, now you know me all too well, and I don't know you, but we were together for a minute, and how cool it was to just for a second be jazzed by each other. That's what it's about, right? To pay attention, to dig it, to laugh. I cried. Are you still crying in public? My mother says, yes, Mom. Boy. But for a little while we were together and we had some jazz. All right, that's all right. So I thank you for your witness. Thank you very much. Amen. Thank you. My sister in the monastery loves to, we have a devout Catholic family, right? And my sister loves to do this to my parents just to annoy them, I think. Namaste, my sister says. I see you, Jesus. My father is amused. My mother is not amused with it. So. Is it up to a couple of minutes for questions and stuff? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do questions and all? No, you.
How did that happen? The Buddhists.
You know, she used to work in the Catholic. You know what the Catholic worker movement is? It's like it's real at the very bottom, beneath all the cruelty and rapaciousness and real estate and stupid. There's a stroke of genius at the very bottom of Catholicism. The greatest thing I ever heard as an explanation of Catholicism was from Mother Teresa, a testy little woman by all accounts, but somebody asked her, she was walking down the street in Calcutta, and the reporter says to her, can you explain this whole Catholic thing? Like, what is the whole point of Catholicism? What's the point of your work, of your order, and blah, 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 blah. And Mother Teresa, there's a guy huddled, a broken guy huddled on the street, and Mother Teresa goes, so I thought, yeah, wordless. That's the way to answer that question. Deal with it, okay? Just deal with it. Feed the hungry, you know. I mean, I think the skinny Jewish guy was pretty clear about it, but what do I know? My pastor just retired, and I said to him, Johnny, what was the biggest mistake you made in your priestly career? Having you teach Sunday school, he said. Immediately, he didn't even hesitate. It was very unnerving. Because I used to start my Sunday school class by saying, okay, his name wasn't Jesus Christ and he wasn't Catholic. And all the kids were like, oh. And all the parents called me that night. You know, so. Anyway, other questions or comments? I asked this question once I visited a class. Again, a girl, and I said, a 5th grade class, I think. Any questions? And a kid raises her hand and says, yeah, I got a question. Is that your real nose? I said, what? I know it's a little big, but I didn't think it was that big. And she goes, well, you have a speech defect, sir. I was like, pardon me? You know? So, no, I'll never get a swelled head. No. So. Other comments, questions, or we should let it go?
Were you raised in Brooklyn?
No, I was born in Queens. And Brooklyn was the far west for us. Oh, dear, no. Brooklyn, fine people. They're to the west. That famous New Yorker cover is totally true of New Yorkers, you know. East Side, West Side, Jersey, space, California. I was telling somebody today, I was telling a student, you know, in New York, my concept of, I never heard of Oregon, you know. I thought it was near Japan, you know. And then I fell in love with an Oregonian, and so I was basically screwed. So I had to move to Oregon, and so, but she was a subtle woman. She used to bring me out in August and September every year. All right, and take me right to the coast. I was like, God, this place is paradise, you know, and it's so lush and green, and yet it's so crisp and clear. Many years later, I have moss on my. So, other questions? I feel like I don't want to keep you till 10, but yes, sir.
Do you have any other like big fictional projects in the works, like any other novels?
But one of the questions I get a lot is, are you going to write a sequel? And I'm thinking, sweet Jesus, no. It took forever. And I felt like I witnessed those. I wanted to witness those people in the book. To me, I could hear them. They were real. And I wanted to do the best I can by them, you know, and I felt like I did okay. I felt kind of paternal about them. Like, once the book was published, I felt like I'd sent everybody to college. You know, they were all safe. And so then I think as a reaction to writing a big novel, I wrote a little lean novel, a little novella called Cat's Foot, about a guy who gets his foot blown off in a war, and then many years later decides to go find it. You know, and his wife's like, that's insane. He goes, yes. Are you coming? And off he goes. So, and then I wrote a book of short stories called Bin Laden's Bald Spot. Many of the ways I fought back against Bin Laden was teasing him. He was one of those stuffed shirt, pompous guys. He's a guy. It was a great epiphany for me one day to realize, oh, Bin Laden was a guy. I don't know anything about women, but I know guys. He was a pompous fathead. One of those guys who the only way you could get to him, he had such a sense of himself that the only way you could needle him was to make people laugh at him. So I wrote a whole bunch of pieces about his bald spot, you know, and you see he dyed his beard. I was like, the visionary prophet of the overthrow of the West wants to look younger? What a jerk. You know, so I would write all these pieces and publish them and then send them to him. Osama bin Laden, Pakistan. I mean, I thought he was in a cave. I didn't know he was in a McMansion. But, you know, my poor lovely bride was always, what if he comes for you? I was like, what, dragging his kidney dialysis machine? I've had 7 back surgeries, and what are we going to do? Play strip chess? I mean, what? So anyway, what if he issues a fatwa? I said, Mary, I don't think anybody's issued a fatwa against minor novelists yet. So anyway, but I do, now I got fascinated. At the very end of Mink River, those of you who have not read it, cover your ears. At the very end, there's a guy just takes off, right? For those of you who read it, Declan, right, the guy, he just turns and sails off. The heck with this, I'm out. And he just takes off along the 45th parallel on his boat. And people always ask me, like in book clubs especially, what happened to Declan? And I thought, I don't know. But now I want to find out. Now I want to find out. And the only way I can find out is with my fingertips. So I started, I thought, well, I'll just take this and see what happens. And it immediately got totally out of control. I think, all right. So the less in control I am, the better. And, you know, one thing I've learned as a writer is let go. If the characters are real, let go. Let them be real. You know, halfway through Mink River, I called a friend of mine who's a novelist and said, this is chaos. They're doing whatever they want. They're not paying any attention to me at all. I got teenagers at home, man. I don't need this. And he goes, so your problem is your characters are too real? I was like, yeah, they're doing whatever they want. Nobody's listening to me at all. And he goes, that's not a problem. They're real. I mean, that's good. Just keep going. I was like, what? It'll be a 10,000-page novel. Tolstoy's dead, for God's sake. He goes, you can always cut. For heaven's sake, you're a professional editor. You can always cut. And that was actually freeing for me. So I want to do the same thing with, I want to find out what happened to the guy. But the only way I can find out is to follow it.
Books available at a deep discount.
We did. And David will buy everybody a beer. Is that correct, David? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention that when you were reading your stuff, I thought, I think his heart is really in northeastern Oregon.
You mean I should be buried here? Is that what you're saying?
No, well, yeah. But the lists of things, it just sounded so much like our area here, and I thought, New York, Portland, you know, his heart is in this.
Well, you know, it's funny. After Mink River came out, I didn't think about it while I was writing it. I just wanted to do it, just committed and listen to these characters, man, and dig it. And then after it came out, I could think, okay, what was that all about? And I realized for me, I finally realized an awful lot of the book for me was I wanted to say thank you to Oregon. Oregon has given me love and joy and pain and rain, but Oregon has been so profligately generous to me that I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to write down Oregonness. You can't do that, but you can fail with panache, and I failed with panache, I feel. But I wanted to say thank you to Oregon. There's some salty, shaggy grace here. There's something different about Oregon. There's something different here. There's a great line from Wallace Stegner who says, the West is the geography of hope. And I think that's especially true of Oregon. There's some kind of shaggy, moist grace in Oregon. People hold hands against the dark here in a cool way. You know, you don't abandon each other, you stay in the game. And I love that. I sort of wanted to sort of witness that in the only way I can. I only have one gift, as my daughter says. So, and so that was a lot of it for me. And I think townness, too. I love towns. Somebody said to me recently, what the hell would you know about towns? You live in Portland, and you lived in Chicago, New York, and Boston. What do you know about towns? I said, nobody lives in a city. Everybody lives in a little 8-block village. No matter where you live, there's 5 or 7 Legrands. Nobody lives in Legrand. You live in a little piece, your little village inside, right? Where there is a de facto mayor, there is a de facto spiritual leader, there is a crook, you know. I mean, you know, everybody lives in these little villages, and that was part of it for me. But a lot of it was I wanted to write, my friend Robin Cody says, what's your ambition for this novel? I said, I want it to be the 9th greatest novel in Oregon history. You know, and I rattle off the top 8. I just want to be in that conversation when, you know, 50 years from now, somebody says, what are the 10 greatest novels in Oregon history? And I want to be number 9, right ahead of Robin Cody. So, you know, Kesey, Molly Gloss, Ursula Le Guin, Barry Lopez's River Notes, I think, is kind of a novel. You know, Craig Leslie, who else? Well, Kim is a great essayist, I think. He hasn't written a novel yet. He will. So, but I want to just be in that, because I wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Oregon. You know, thank you for all this joy and grace and pain. My children came out of Oregon, you know, like mushrooms. Actually, I was just visiting, okay, last story. See, this will go on all night. I was visiting another grade school, and a kid said to me, yeah, you going on and on about miracles? and forgiveness and mercy and blah, 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 blah. You ever seen any miracles? I said, well, first of all, take another breath. Okay, take another one. So that's 2. Did you ever see a sparrow up close and personal? That's 3. But I said, you want an honest answer to this question, kid? I'll give you an honest answer. I saw people come out of my wife. Okay? Everybody says it's miraculous. It's not miraculous. It's disturbing. There were people living inside the woman I married, okay? They never paid any rent. I don't know who they were. And they kept coming out. You know, it was weird. You know, it was like, you seen the movie Alien? It was like that. And all the little kids, I realized sometimes I shouldn't speak to classes because all the kids are looking at me with absolute horror. I'm sure that all those girls will never have children now. You know? Oh, it was horrifying, you know? I mean, they kept pulling children out. Imagine having twins. They kept pulling them out. I'm like, is this going to end? Because I'm tired. I haven't slept properly, and I'd really like to go home. And then, you know, the doctors, like, they hauled out my daughter, our daughter, and the doctor, for some reason, thought this was funny. Holds up my daughter to me and says, male or female? I'm thinking, aren't those the only choices? I mean, what is, like, vegetable? Male or female? Well, the umbilical cord was hanging right down the middle. I'm like, wow, that is either a girl with a major problem, or that is a guy who needs a wheelbarrow. So, and then our twins were born, and they kept coming out, and you know, and my son Liam, his first act of life in this planet, in this sphere, his very first act as a person in the air was he stole the scissors. The nurse comes to cut the cord, he grabs the scissors, and he won't let go. You know, infants have that lock grip, and he won't let go. A nurse comes over to pry the fingers off. She can't get it off. Another nurse comes over. Neither of them can get the kid's fingers off, and they turn and look at me accusingly, and I'm like, I don't know the guy. So, anyways, have I seen miracles? Hell yes. You know, I felt like my lovely bride was an apartment building, and people were living in there. Very disturbing. She was huge. She's a little tiny woman, and she was so cosmic with these twins. My brother Peter bought her a pup tent to wear. See, Peter thought that was funny, and my lovely bride was not amused. So, anyway, we should probably stop because I feel like you have to go home do homework and stuff. So thank you.